99 Concord Road. We want to talk about that
Sure.
a little bit. I think
Yeah,
this
why
gentleman
not?
is here for that discussion.
Okay.
So we might actually let him home for dinner.
All right, go ahead, Betsy.
The planning board put in a fairly lengthy letter that was incorporated into a communication that was sent to Mass Housing.
The one that the memo that you passed around to us to comment on.
Yeah. So, I don't know what the status is at this point. I have talked with Donna briefly about the staking and layout, and I may just contact the developer directly and say, you know, if the planning board's willing to do this, are you willing to allow us on the property?
It sounded like they might be willing to do it themselves when it was raised. Director said.
Pardon?
It sounds like they might be willing to do it themselves.
Only after it's been approved.
Right.
Right, that was
Only
the
what?
catch. Only after it was approved.
Only
After the site's
after,
approved.
this, what
It's
happens
a
is,
two-step process.
It's a phasing,
yeah, what happens is the state may or may not give him site assignment.
Oh, I see.
And the site assignment is based on the comments made by various town boards and abutters and whatever. So I believe he stated at the meeting, one of the developers stated at the meeting that he would be ready to do that, but only after he knew he had a project, which means he was given site assignment from the state.
Which kind of makes sense, I guess.
So,
Why spend, money on something that you're not gonna get? You know, if you
and he
get
was
it,
of the
then
opinion that it
it's a
would cost
progress.
him $7,000 or $8,000 to do.
But once it gets to that point where he has permission to build on that site, that
Then
doesn't
he-
mean he has permission to build exactly what he's proposing and therefore putting the stakes in and our commenting on them isn't
Too late, right.
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 Is that
What-
correct?
That's correct. What happens is if the state gives him site assignment, then he is willing to put the stakes in the ground, but then he will be filing with the ZBA for a comprehensive permit. So, and then the planning board will get a second round of review and comment of the project, but the planning board's review is limited under 40B to advisory to the ZBA.
Well, do you want to go into the scenic road considerations a little bit?
We did ask legal counsel and, about the scenic road issue. And it's tricky because it's a state, the developer is supposed to comply with state laws, and scenic roads is a state law, but then there's local jurisdiction. So, legal counsel basically stated that, outlined a protocol for how the ZBA and the planning board should handle it. And that the ZBA needed to be cognizant of the fact that it was a scenic road and that there were certain criteria. So,
Well, we have to issue a permit, which is not part of the comprehensive permit.
right,
And the permit deals with tree removal and stone wall modification in the right of way.
mhm,
So, question number one is, are the stone walls in the right of way? And then question number two is, what latitude do we have to condition the scenic road stone wall modification provision? If there's an opening in the stone wall, this is the way I understand it, so correct me if I'm wrong.
mhm.
If there's an opening in the stone wall that allows site access, would we be on solid ground requiring them to use the existing opening in the stone wall for their access?
As well as preventing them from making an additional opening?
Well, yeah, if the proposal, if there's a viable site access existing. And the proposal is to shift that site access. And we think that would be detrimental to the preservation of the stone wall. Could we say, no, we don't agree with moving the opening? We think you should keep the opening where it is, because it's a perfectly viable opening. And one of the issues there is that they're actually shifting the proposed opening closer to the intersection of Miriam and Concord. So it seems to me that we've got
So we would have some traffic.
But didn't you say that
Support.
they were doing that to preserve that old maple tree?
Actually, I
Because-
think that maple's coming down. I think it's right in the way of the new driveway.
But he went through great length to tell us that
Yeah,
that
you
was
said
not coming
over and
down.
over again they wanted to keep it.
Yeah, that was going to
And
be
that's-
one
and
tree
that's-
on
and
this
that's why
property.
the little flag for the center of the road was right at the edge of the wall.
Right.
So, I would assume,
But that's another thing, I mean, because it isn't staked, you can't see what it's doing to the
Exactly.
roots. You can't see how much of the roots they're gonna take out when they,
I know what he
road
said,
bed,
but
yeah.
looking at the site plan and looking at the maple tree,
Mm.
and looking at their driveway and looking at the maple tree, it looked to me as though if the driveway's not going through the maple, it's getting very
Gotta
close.
shave
to
it pretty close.
well, because the way the law is, this board has very little ability to require something. And so that puts us more in the sort of cajole, negotiate, smile, hope,
Well,
make good
I'm not
sense
sure
But
that's
maybe
really
this is a
true.
permit.
This is,
This is a
for
permit.
that wall,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's not, that's the question I have. How much latitude do we have? How much leverage in granting or denying that permit with respect to the layout that's being proposed? Would it, if there,
You're right, it's good to know what that is, because that's,
exactly.
that comes down to our best, agreement, or our best outcome to a negotiated agreement kind of thing, our background, if you will.
I think that,
So it's good to know that.
my personal opinion is that, and I think that the town's feeling though also is that the project as proposed is extraordinarily dense, especially in that location where where there are all kinds of issues besides the visual issues
Mhm.
that are going to be there. I mean, there are traffic issues. And right now, they're proposing for I think it's a 25-unit proposal. 24. They're proposing one
with one entrance.
entrance and
Right.
exit.
Yeah, with a circle,
And,
yeah.
the question is, that,
Housing.
we're talking about something like somewhere between 40 and 50 cars using that one entrance and exit close to the intersection of Miriam and Concord. And so, what kinds of considerations, what sort of negotiations does the town have available to mitigate the impacts of a project that dense? That's what it comes down to.
2 points I have. They actually showed parking spaces for 100 parking spaces. 100.
Okay.
In garage, 2 in garage, and
Wow.
2 outside. So, that's a lot of parking spaces.
That's a lot of parking
Secondly,
spaces.
if you want an idea of what the density is, there was a project done in Winchester on Route 3 that probably finished up about a year and a half ago. And it was 50 units on 10 acres.
Mm.
So, it's right
About the
across,
same.
it's right across from Mahoney's Rocky Ledge.
Mhm.
And if you
Yeah, we
do a
looked at that.
drive-by, you'll get a very good idea.
And same developer?
Yes.
No, different developer.
Because he was also saying they were
They do
doing,
a couple.
or had just done development in Winchester.
Belmont, I thought.
Oh, was it
I
Belmont?
thought
It was
he had
Belmont.
a couple.
It was Belmont, it wasn't Winchester.
Yeah.
Are their plans developed enough as they are right now to even be staked by our people?
They have the footprints of the units. My guess is they have standard units,
Uh-huh.
but they're just cookie cutters,
Mhm.
and they just line them up
Yeah.
in whatever combination
Configuration they can
works.
squeeze on.
That's what it looks like.
So I'm sure they have floor plans and everything else. But one of the questions I have about the Winchester project is, do we know if the unit sizes are comparable?
They were significantly more comparable than what is proposed for 99
What do you
Concord.
mean?
More comparable?
You mean
Like-
They're-
between
they're-
affordables and market rates? or
Oh,
what?
the units in, there were 5 units in the Cambridge development that were affordable to meet the
Cambridge?
town's, in Winchester, to meet the 10%, the town's 10% requirement. It wasn't a 40B,
Okay.
that particular project. And the planning board and the ZBA, in the approval of the process, made sure that the affordable units were comparable to the market rate units.
Well, I didn't realize it was part of the 40B law. I thought that was just
Yeah.
from the newspaper article. I thought it was really just Boston's
No,
requirements.
that was one
Yeah,
of the
so-
biggest gripes in
Yeah.
what we wrote, was
Right.
that
Inferior, small
there were
units.
4 units that fronted on Concord Road, and 2 of them were the affordable units, the larger units. And then there are 4 smaller units that are like 1,400 square feet that are not comparable, because the lowest square footage unit for the market rate unit is like 2,400 square feet. So they did not include the first floor master suite, and they're all interior units.
Mhm, right.
So they're not comparable at all.
But my question, and I understand that point, but my question is, for the market rate units, are the unit sizes comparable between Winchester and what they're proposing on Concord? Do you know, 2,300 in both cases? or
Yeah, but
do you
then,
think?
yeah. The Winchester ones have the ability to, some people ended up building out their basements. So they
Yeah.
ended up with larger square footage of units.
Right, but you see my point, that
Yeah.
it's not just the number of units, it's also the size of the
Size,
units
Right, right.
that are gonna.
The base size of the Winchester units was comparable to
Yeah.
the units that are being proposed,
Okay,
with first floor masters. And so that makes the building bulkier, because you've got that additional square footage,
yeah.
so.
What are the possible outcomes after the review? I mean, it's either yes or it's no, or it's yes with these conditions, that it's too dense, we recommend that in fact it's smaller?
Yeah.
Is that
I mean,
something
the
that they
state is
actually-
supposed to look at all the comments and address them,
Mhm.
so,
In this first phase?
yeah.
I won't ask you to predict what the state might say.
When will the state make the decision?
I don't know.
All right, well, so where does it stand with respect to town council's opinion on the Scenic Road's decision? Are we,
There was an email sent back to me, and I thought you got it.
I did, I wasn't exactly clear. It sounded to me as though they said, we do have jurisdiction.
Hmm.
Is that the way you read it?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, you have your hand raised?
I just have 2 comments, I guess.
Could you just
Your name?
identify yourself?
Christopher Scott, 90 Concord Road. During the site walk, Michael Busby, who is the Mass Housing representative, he mentioned that the Mass Housing would issue or not issue the project eligibility letter within 60 days. So to answer your question about the timeline. The question I have is, has the board considered conducting a traffic study based on the current site layout and submitting those comments to
We should.
Mass Housing?
I think we should. Personally, I think we should. I don't think that's gonna be our decision, though.
I mean, we did include in the recommendation that a traffic study be done.
I guess my question is to actually, or my suggestion is to actually conduct a traffic study, perform a traffic study and submit that showing the safety issue as a matter of fact instead of as a hypothetical.
Well, is it too late to perform the traffic study once they've been granted approval to use that site?
No.
No, it wouldn't be.
The applicant would do a traffic study.
But we'd want to.
We would want our own.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We
So
at
that's-
least
I think that's-
hire somebody to review it.
But,
So I think the answer to your question is we will do a traffic study if they're granted approval to build on that site.
The only reason I bring it up, I guess, is it sounded like during the site walk that the applicant, Northland, is conducting a traffic study as we speak. They will presumably submit that to Mass Housing saying there's no issue.
That's right.
And if it's not rebutted in some way, Mass Housing will say there's no issue and issue the letter. But the town can still obviously, and residents can conduct their own traffic study for that matter before the ZBA. But if one is conducted before the eligibility letter is issued by Mass Housing, it sort of allows us to attack them earlier in the process.
My
or at least get that
experience-
information into the decision makers prior to decision.
Well, how about I contact Mike Busby and say, can you provide us with this traffic study, and we'll have our guy review it.
Well,
Why don't we do it independently?
a couple of things. One thing, in my experience, you can get a traffic engineer to say just about
Right,
anything.
right.
So.
So do
if-
we want Mr. Michaud? to
I
do
think
the
we ought
review?
to, I think we need to receive what they present to us and then either confirm it or not. I'm not sure that we could do it proactively. I'm not sure we have enough information yet from the application that we've got so far.
We know how many parking spaces and how many units. What else do we need to know? from-
Well, the location of the driveway is on the essentially schematic of the layout.
Right.
So the
I think
information's
we
there
should
to
go-
conduct a
I
traffic
think we
study.
should do our independent one ourselves.
Okay, but then the
Let's-
question is, if we do our independent one now, is there time to submit it for the state to review it and for, for it to be useful information to the state? Or is it gonna be a waste of time, because by the time they get it, they're not gonna be able to look at
Well,
it?
it sounds like
That's the
a
question.
phone call to
Yeah.
Mr. Busby.
I'll talk to Mr. Busby.
Because within 60 days could mean 2 weeks, or it could mean
Mhm.
closer to.
Right, and then we'd have to see how long it would take our traffic consultant to actually prepare it
He's-
and all that stuff.
He's heading to Disneyland as we speak.
Well, I'm sure it won't happen until after the first of the
They
year,
have phones
so.
there.
Well,
When did the 60-day clock start ticking? I mean, there are too many variables.
I- and I've got, another question I have is that something that we as the planning board would do on our own? Or is that something that we should suggest? I mean, where does that study fit into the overall picture?
I've never known a planning board to do a study, to be that proactive.
Yeah, but does that mean we can't?
No, it doesn't. It means you can do what you want, but let's
Yeah.
figure out the timing of it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure that we were on solid footing,
Yeah.
hiring a traffic engineer to do a study on our own. I guess as long as we tell the selectmen what we're up to.
We should also tell the ZBA what we're up to. Or suggest that maybe they hire one. So would I. They might like to hire one themselves, but,
I don't think they do
right, I've got more faith in what they're doing.
that. Now, is there a 40B in this town yet?
Yeah.
Built?
Yeah,
Friendly 40B.
yes,
Friendly?
yeah,
So
several.
not,
Several.
not an unfriendly one?
No,
Not possible.
not yet. Oh, I don't know, maybe the one on Winter Street, that was sort of before friendly and
Yeah,
possible
right.
40Bs.
It wasn't like the one on South Ave with Carol. I mean,
Right,
on,
there's
Route
Carol
20.
Cito's.
Yeah, Carol Cito's.
Right.
And then we've just managed to get so many units put in individual things.
And then there's the McDowell 40B on South Avenue. That almost nobody knows anything about.
Yeah.
It's built?
It's
Built?
near the, yes, oh yeah, it's
60.
been built for 10 years anyway.
24 units?
Yeah, most
Where
people
is
don't
it?
even, it's near the
60.
state police.
Oh, okay, so
What?
it's in sort of an
Station.
okay, appropriate kind of.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
even really
you don't even
notice
notice it, and it's kind of industrial over there anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a big impact on.
It's not in the middle of the town forest, is what you're
No.
saying.
So nothing that potentially is gonna have the impact on this house?
No,
So,
nowhere close. No, this is
That's right.
transformative.
Yes.
That's really the question.
They mentioned who their traffic consultant was.
I guess it's BHB
So
or
it's
something.
BHB.
Is that who we use?
No,
No.
we use,
Okay, so no conflict there, we can do it.
No.
Okay, they're not
Right.
I mean, that's
grabbing
the-
our consultant.
The default consultant for any developer, just about.
Right.
Sorry, I have one more question, actually. Does the planning board conduct stormwater studies, and is that something that you could also do?
Yeah.
Because the other concern that neighbors have in terms of safety and health issues, number one is the traffic, and number two is sort of the stormwater issue, relating to the density, obviously. And also the fact that much of that area is in a FEMA flood zone, high-risk flood zone. And so the concern is that land sitting sort of higher up in a lot of the surrounding land is gonna just dump water on everyone.
We routinely in site plan review, we have a civil engineer who looks at the stormwater calculations in the systems. But is Concom gonna be impacted by this? No, okay. It sounds like it might be, the site might be kind of wet. I guess if there are no wetlands and it's not
No
in a flood
wetlands,
zone.
no.
Yeah, the site itself is out of all the wetlands and
Yeah.
floodplain, but all the surrounding properties, or most of the surrounding properties are in the flood zone and in the wetland areas.
You know,
Well, by state law, they have to keep runoff on property. They can't increase it. So,
Although, my understanding of the state law is that it only looks at 2, 10, and possibly 100-year storms. It does not require containing 500-year storms, nor does it require containing storms of a duration greater than 24 hours.
we don't design things for 500-year storms.
Well, but then that's the concern of the residents.
In any urban area, in suburban area where there is storm drains, they're like 10 to 20 year. That's it.
Yeah.
Not the
Well, we
100
do
year.
100
No,
year
we do
here.
100.
Really?
We do
Oh,
100
yeah.
year.
Oh, that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do 10, 20, 10, 2, 10, 2700.
We have 100-year culverts.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone designs a 500-year storm.
No, but, well, and also even the state law, from what I understand, doesn't even necessarily require a 100-year storm.
No,
We do
it's-
100 year storm here.
it's-
But they don't,
What
they
the
can
state
ignore.
law says is that you cannot increase runoff from what currently exists.
Yeah.
That's what it says. So it doesn't get into specific storms, I don't think, unless I get something wrong.
no, we definitely do design.
Yeah, but in terms of what the state law says for like development and stuff, and stormwater regs, that you just cannot increase, runoff from, you can't increase runoff from what previously existed.
Yeah, typically what we do is ask for a reduction.
Yeah.
State law says no increase, but we actually
Right.
go for reductions. So it's typically in the order of about 20% reduction in runoff. Now, that's the planning board standard.
Comply with that?
Well, that's a question, whether,
Well,
what are reasonable conditions
I
to
think-
place?
And I think most engineers like to have that margin that protects them from it going over. So add 20% there.
I mean, that's gonna be a ZBA decision, frankly. We'll give them our recommendations, but they issue the permit, so their conditions are gonna be what they are.
Yeah.
My guess is that in the review of the project, the engineering department will also make some comments. So,
Right.
and they'll want it to abide by the stormwater regulations of the town.
Now, whether they could say no to that, or the ZBA would decide that they only have to comply with state law, that's gonna be part of the comprehensive permit negotiation, I guess.
They did have a number of infiltration systems proposed.
Well,
Um,
looking at the plan, it looks like there are only placeholders of where they could theoretically put basins. So they haven't actually even tested the soil to see if they could dig a hole there and put a basin, let alone if the sizing would be sufficient to contain the runoff from that density of the site. Because they've essentially put either blacktop units, leaching field, or these placeholders on every
Right,
square
right.
inch is free. So if those
Yeah.
placeholders aren't big enough, there's nowhere else to put the space.
I mean, it's so preliminary, there's not even any topographical
Right.
consideration at this point in their plan. It's as though the site is flat as this table, and if you just walk the site for 2 minutes, you realize that there's quite a rise in the back of the site, so.
That's why they have $470,000 for grading.
To make it nice and flat.
Well, yeah, but what does that do? Where's the, anyway. By the way, that's another question.
Earth removal.
Earth removal.
Earth removal, yeah, that's gonna,
Are they subject
They
to
would
it?
bypass it because it's a zoning bylaw.
No, earth removal is not a zoning bylaw. Earth movement is, but removal is a general bylaw.
Okay.
We don't know whether they're even planning to put basements in.
Yeah, we don't. Doesn't
Check.
count the calculation, but
You know, if it would count in terms of moving, removal of dirt.
it would. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's another question, I guess, for town council. They need a separate permit for earth removal.
I can check.
Yeah, no, believe me, it's there, it's in the general bylaws, it's been there for 20 years, 25 years. Okay, did you have any other comments or questions?
I do not, thank you.
All right, so
Thank you.
thanks for